First Contact Folly. The Kraxan Empire's Supreme Commander Zyxtal stood before the massive holographic display, their crystalline form refracting light across the command chamber. The image before them showed a seemingly unremarkable blue planet, designated as Sol 3 by their stellar cartographers. What made this particular world remarkable was its classification, Class 13 Deathworld. Impossible, Zyxtal's secondary consciousness muttered, a common trait among their crystalline species. No sentient species could evolve on such a world, let alone survive. Fleet Admiral Vernoon, a veteran of 1,000 conquests, shifted uncomfortably on their hover platform. The classification is accurate, Supreme Commander. Our preliminary scans indicate not only surviving species but a dominant one that has achieved rudimentary space flight. The chamber filled with the soft chiming sound of shocked crystalline beings vibrating in disbelief. Class 13 Deathworlds were theoretical nightmares, planets so hostile that even microorganisms should struggle to survive. Yet here was one, not only teeming with life but hosting a spacefaring civilization. "Show me the dominant species," Zyxtal commanded, their crystal structure pulsing with anticipation. The hologram shifted, displaying various images of humans going about their daily lives. The Kraxans observed in fascination as these soft, bilateral beings moved through environments that would kill most species in the known galaxy. These creatures, Vernoon began, call themselves humans. They survive in temperature ranges that would shatter our forms, pressure variations that would crush most species, and atmospheric conditions that would poison any reasonable life form. Zyxtal's crystal structure darkened with determination. Yet they appear primitive. Their technology is crude, their weapons rudimentary. They haven't even achieved faster-than-light travel. With respect, Supreme Commander, interjected Science Director Riltex, their usually brilliant crystal structure clouded with concern, their technological level may be irrelevant. The fact that they exist at all on such a world suggests capabilities we may not understand. Zyxtal dismissed the concern with a harmonic wave. Send in the reconnaissance drones. Class 13 or not, we must understand these humans if we are to maintain our empire's expansion. The first wave of drones entered Earth's atmosphere at precisely calculated entry points. These were the pride of Kraxan engineering, crystalline machines that could withstand the vacuum of space and the pressures of gas giant planets. They were virtually indestructible by conventional means. The first drone lasted exactly 6 minutes before being struck by lightning over Kansas. The second made it 8 minutes before being ingested by a curious whale off the coast of Norway. The third crashed in the Amazon rainforest, its crystalline structure completely compromised by what the science team would later discover was simple humidity. Impossible. Zyxtal's voice reverberated through the command chamber, sending sympathetic vibrations through the assembled officers. How can simple atmospheric discharge destroy our most advanced technology? How can primitive organic creatures disable our drones? Science Director Riltex's analysis was grim. The planet's environment is far more volatile than our initial scans suggested. The atmospheric conditions alone create energy discharges that exceed our shielding capabilities. The planet's flora and fauna have evolved defense mechanisms that our technology never accounted for. But it was the fourth drone's data stream that truly shook the Kraxan High Command. Before its signal went dark somewhere over what humans called Australia, it transmitted footage of a human child casually handling one of the planet's most lethal creatures, a small, ringed octopus containing enough neurotoxin to kill 50 Kraxans. They coexist with death, Vernoon whispered, their crystalline form dimming with horror. These humans don't just survive their world, they thrive in it. The final drone in the initial wave provided the most disturbing footage of all. It observed humans willingly entering the planet's vast oceans, bodies of water so corrosive they could dissolve Kraxan crystal in hours, for something the humans called surfing. They did this for entertainment. Zyxtal's command chamber had fallen silent, the usual harmonious chiming of crystalline beings replaced by the heavy silence of dawning realization. They had discovered a species that treated one of the deadliest planets in the known universe as a playground. Perhaps, Riltex ventured carefully, we should reconsider our expansion plans for this sector. Zwexdal's crystal structure pulsed with reluctant agreement. Begin full planetary surveillance. We need to understand what we're dealing with. And update the classification files. Earth isn't just a Class 13 death world. It's the home of something far more terrifying, a species that calls such a place normal. The Kraxan Empire had discovered many things in its millennia of expansion. But on that day, they discovered something new, fear. Not of advanced weapons or superior numbers, but of a species that made their home on a world that should have been impossible to inhabit, let alone dominate. And somewhere on Earth, a child was teaching their younger sibling how to safely handle a tarantula, completely unaware that they were causing an interstellar empire to reconsider its entire expansion strategy. The desert's fury. The humans call it the Sahara, Science Director Riltex announced, their crystalline form projecting data streams across the command chamber. A vast expanse of minimal biological activity. The closest environment to our home world that we've found on this death trap of a planet. Supreme Commander Zwexdal's crystal structure brightened with interest. After the disaster of their initial reconnaissance, the promise of familiar territory was appealing. Temperature ranges. Extreme by most standards, but manageable with our technology. The lack of moisture will protect our forms from the degradation we experienced in other regions. Fleet Admiral Vernoon, still traumatized from watching the drone footage of humans willingly swimming in Earth's corrosive oceans, vibrated with cautious optimism. Perhaps here we can finally understand these creatures without risk of chemical dissolution. The Kraxans deployed their second wave of surveillance equipment, this time focusing on the vast desert region. The initial readings were promising, dry, hot, seemingly hostile to life. Perfect. Then they discovered the nomads. They're doing what? Zwexdal's voice cracked, sending discordant harmonics through the command chamber. Living there, Supreme Commander, Riltex replied, their crystal structure clouded with disbelief. Not just surviving. They've developed entire cultures adapted to these conditions. The footage showed humans crossing the desert in long caravans, their bodies wrapped in flowing garments that protected them from the savage sun and windblown sand. They navigated by stars, found water in seemingly impossible places, and thrived in conditions that would challenge even the Kraxan's crystalline resilience. But the temperature variations alone should be lethal, Vernoon protested. Our sensors show shifts of over 40 degrees between day and night. The humans have adapted, Riltex explained, their scientific curiosity overtaking their horror. They've developed methods to retain water, shelter from the extremes, and even cultivate food in these conditions. The command chamber erupted in harmonic discord as new footage arrived. A group of human younglings were sliding down a massive dune on boards, their laughter carrying across the desert winds. They were playing in conditions that would crack lesser species like cheap mineral formations. Send in the ground team, Zwexdal ordered, their tone suggesting they were already regretting the decision. We need direct observation. The Kraxan ground team, encased in their finest protective crystalline suits, materialized in a remote section of the desert. Their mission was simple, observe and report on human desert adaptation techniques. They lasted 3 hours before the first sandstorm hit. The storm wasn't just wind and sand, it was nature's fury given form. The crystalline suits, designed to withstand the vacuum of space, began to crack under the relentless barrage of tiny silicon particles. The team watched in horror as their equipment was stripped down to raw crystal by the abrasive assault. Impossible. The team leaders' panic harmonized through their emergency beacon. The particles are reshaping the molecular structure of our suits. Through the howling wind, they spotted something even more terrifying, a human settlement, its structures designed to channel and deflect the very forces that were destroying their advanced technology. The humans had built homes in this environmental apocalypse. As the team struggled to maintain their cohesion, they witnessed a human child running between buildings, laughing as they raced to get inside before the storm peaked. The child's parent called out casually, as if the apocalyptic conditions were nothing more than a light shower. The final insult came when their sensors detected a massive human construction project at the edge of the desert. They were building solar farms, not just surviving in the desert but harnessing its brutal conditions for power. Evacuation. The team leader's cry shattered several nearby crystals. Emergency protocols. As the Kraxan team desperately beamed back to their ships, leaving behind several pieces of equipment that had been stripped down to raw crystal by the sand, they caught one last glimpse of human resilience, a group of researchers setting up camp, preparing to study the storm that had just forced an advanced alien species to flee in terror. Back on the command ship, Zyxtal reviewed the disaster with growing unease. They've weaponized their environment, they concluded. Every hostile aspect of their world, they've turned to their advantage. Supreme Commander, Riltex ventured, their usual scientific detachment cracking like their desert equipment, I believe we need to consider the possibility that we are dealing with a species that doesn't just survive Class 13 conditions, they actively seek them out for habitation. The implications sent shivers through the crystalline crew. What kind of species would choose to live in such conditions? What kind of civilization would emerge from a place where even the ground itself could destroy advanced technology? Prepare for urban reconnaissance, Zyxtal ordered, their tone suggesting they knew they were heading toward another disaster. Perhaps their cities will prove more comprehensible. They couldn't have been more wrong. Urban jungle. Sensor readings are problematic, Supreme Commander, Science Director Riltex reported, their crystalline form flickering with confusion. The human settlement designated Tokyo contains more beings in a single vertical structure than exist on some developed planets. Supreme Commander Zyxtal's crystal structure pulsed with disbelief as they studied the holographic representation of the human megacity. The density of life signs was beyond comprehension, millions of humans stacked in towering structures, moving through underground tunnels, and flowing through streets in endless streams. How do they not drive themselves insane? Fleet Admiral Vernoon wondered aloud, their form vibrating with anxiety at the mere thought of such proximity. The energy readings alone should be lethal. The Kraxans had chosen Tokyo for their urban reconnaissance mission precisely because it seemed impossible. Their logic, already strained by Earth's countless contradictions, suggested that humans couldn't possibly function in such conditions. Therefore, this must be some kind of elaborate deception. The first infiltration team materialized in a quiet alley, their crystalline forms disguised by advanced holographic technology to appear as random pieces of urban debris. Within minutes, their carefully laid plans encountered a uniquely human obstacle, a group of teenagers taking selfies with what they thought was an aesthetically pleasing arrangement of crystals. Maintain stillness, the team leader harmonized on their secure frequency. They can't possibly. A teenager with bright blue hair leaned against one of the disguised Kraxans, causing their holographic camouflage to flicker momentarily. Instead of panic, this generated excitement. Awesome special effects, the teenager exclaimed, immediately starting a live stream. Hey followers, check this out. The team's emergency extraction left behind several confused but delighted humans and a trending hashtag about mysterious disappearing crystals. The second team opted for a different approach, positioning themselves on top of a skyscraper to observe from a safe distance. Their crystalline sensors were immediately overwhelmed by the cacophony of electromagnetic signals saturating the air. This is impossible, the team's technology specialist chimed in distress. There are more active communication channels in this single city block than in most star systems. How do their brains not cook from the exposure? Below them, humans moved through this invisible storm of data without concern, their primitive organic bodies somehow functioning in conditions that were scrambling advanced alien sensors. They watched in horror as humans casually used devices that connected to this overwhelming network, their minds somehow remaining intact despite the constant information bombardment. The true shock came when they analyzed the content of these communications. They're sharing pictures of their food? Realtex questioned, reviewing the data streams. Warning others about traffic conditions. Engaging in complex social interactions while simultaneously navigating physically demanding environments. The Craxans observed as humans performed what they came to call the commute, a daily ritual that seemed designed to test the limits of sentient endurance. Humans packed themselves into metal tubes, stood for long periods in crushing proximity, yet emerged to perform complex tasks requiring high cognitive function. Their young, Vernoon noted with particular horror, they gather them in specialized structures for knowledge transfer, and then, organize recreational activities in these conditions. They watched as human children emerged from schools, immediately immersing themselves in the urban chaos with apparent joy. Some navigated through crowds on small-wheeled devices, others gathered in parks surrounded by the very electromagnetic storm that was disrupting Craxan technology, all while their guardians monitored multiple information streams on primitive handheld devices. The final straw came during rush hour. The Craxan observers watched in mounting horror as millions of humans moved through the city in what appeared to be a carefully choreographed dance of organized chaos. Underground trains arrived with precision despite carrying enough electrical charge to stun a space whale. Streets filled and emptied like planetary tides, carrying countless humans through gaps that their vehicles shouldn't logically fit through. "They've mastered chaos," Zwyxtal whispered, their crystal structure dimming with the revelation. "They don't just survive it, they create it, shape it, thrive in it." A new data stream caught their attention. Humans were gathering in massive numbers for something called a summer festival. The readings showed dangerous levels of sound energy, thermal variations that would stress most environmental suits, and enough collective biological activity to register as a small planetary ecosystem. "They're celebrating," Realtex observed, their scientific detachment finally cracking. "They've built these impossible environments, filled them beyond any sane capacity, saturated them with enough energy to power a space fleet, and they're celebrating." In the command chamber, the Craxan leadership watched as humans danced beneath artificial stars, their cityscape a glowing testament to their mastery over conditions that should have been lethal. Children played with handheld fusion sources they called sparklers, while adults consumed substances that would be classified as toxic waste on most worlds. "We must understand their wilderness zones," Zwyxtal declared, though their tone suggested they were running out of hope for finding any part of Earth that made sense. "Surely there, away from their mad artificial environments, we can find some logic to their existence." As the command ship sensors recalibrated for their next mission, a final image from Tokyo caught their attention. A human child had found one of their abandoned sensor crystals and was now wearing it as jewelry, completely unaffected by its complex atomic structure. The Craxans were beginning to suspect they had severely underestimated what it meant to be classified as a Class 13 species. Nature's wrath. "The readings must be incorrect," Supreme Commander Zwyxtal insisted, their crystalline form flickering with agitation. "No single planet should contain this many distinct biological danger zones." Science Director Realtex's holographic display showed a planet riddled with what the Craxans could only describe as death traps, vast rainforests teeming with poisonous life forms, frozen wastelands where humans somehow thrived, and entire regions where the ground itself could split open and spew molten rock. Each ecosystem, Realtex explained, their scientific tone strained, appears specifically designed to eliminate life. Yet somehow, it accomplishes the opposite. The first wildlife observation team materialized in what humans called the Amazon rainforest. Their mission lasted exactly 12 minutes before they had to evacuate due to something the humans casually referred to as bullet ants. They named them after weapons, the team leader shrieked during debriefing, their crystalline form still vibrating from the encounter. The humans classified them based on the pain they cause, and then continued to live alongside them. The second team chose what they thought would be a safer location, the Australian outback. Their report, transmitted between increasingly panicked bursts, read like a horror story. "Everything here is lethal," the field researcher harmonized, their crystal structure cracking with stress. "The mammals are venomous. The reptiles are venomous. Even the plants have evolved to cause pain. And the humans have categorized them all with cheerful nicknames. Fleet Admiral Vernoon reviewed footage of a human environmental researcher carefully handling one of the planet's most venomous snakes. Notice, they pointed out, their tone somewhere between awe and terror, how the human is smiling. They're enjoying this. The Kraxans watched in mounting horror as humans demonstrated their mastery over environments that should have been impossible to survive, let alone study. They documented humans diving into waters filled with predators, climbing frozen mountains for recreation, and willingly approaching creatures that could kill with a single touch. We've detected a new anomaly, Riltex reported. Humans are deliberately entering a region with active volcanic activity. They call it Hawaii. The command chamber fell silent as they observed humans surfing near active lava flows, building dwellings on mountains that periodically exploded, and treating one of the most tectonically unstable regions on the planet as a vacation destination. They're insane, Vernoon whispered, their crystalline resonance barely audible. They must be. But it was the regular humans, the ones not engaged in extreme research or adventure, that truly demonstrated the species' terrifying nature. The Kraxans observed in disbelief as humans kept apex predators as companions, calling them pets. Cultivated modified versions of toxic plants for gardens. Deliberately sought out dangerous creatures to photograph them. Created preservation areas for animals that could easily kill them. Built research stations in locations that regularly experienced natural disasters. The breaking point came when they discovered human children's educational materials. They're teaching their young to respect these creatures, Riltex reported, but not to fear them. They're raising an entire generation to view Class 13 conditions as normal. A particularly disturbing piece of footage showed a class of human children on a field trip to study venomous arachnids. The children displayed excitement rather than the rational terror any sane species would exhibit. Supreme Commander, Vernoon ventured carefully, I believe we need to consider the possibility that the humans aren't merely surviving on a Class 13 death world. They're actively maintaining it. Zwextal's crystal structure dimmed with the implications. Explain. They're preserving the very conditions that should be lethal. They're protecting dangerous species, maintaining lethal environments, and passing this knowledge to their offspring. They're not just adapted to this world, they're its guardians. The command chamber resonated with the collective horror of this realization. The humans weren't victims of their terrible world, they were its custodians, actively ensuring that Earth remained as lethal as ever. Perhaps, Riltex suggested, their scientific curiosity somehow surviving everything they'd witnessed, we should observe how they handle direct confrontation. Surely even they must have limits. Zwextal's crystal structure pulsed with grim determination. Prepare for final assessment protocols. If we're to understand these beings, we must see how they respond to a direct challenge. As the Kraxan fleet prepared for their final test, they remained unaware that their various observation attempts had not gone unnoticed. Human intelligence agencies had been tracking their activities with increasing interest, and Earth's defenders were preparing a welcome that would redefine the meaning of Class 13 Deathworld. Humanity Unleashed. The Kraxan Empire's final assessment of Earth began with what Supreme Commander Zwextal considered a reasonable approach, a show of force above Earth's major cities. Surely, they reasoned, the humans would respond with appropriate fear when confronted by superior technology. The massive ships of the Kraxan fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere in perfect crystalline formation, their hulls refracting sunlight in a dazzling display of power. They positioned themselves above several major population centers, ready to demonstrate their superiority. The humans responded by taking pictures. They're documenting us. Vernoon's crystal structure vibrated with confusion as millions of phones pointed skyward. In multiple formats. Before the Kraxans could process this bizarre reaction, Earth's actual response began. It started with a single human transmission, broadcast globally, to the aliens currently posing over our cities, we've been watching you watch us. Let's talk. The message came from Admiral Regina Williams of the newly revealed Earth Defense Force, an organization whose existence had been carefully concealed from the Kraxen's observation teams. Her tone was polite, professional, and carried an undertone that made Zwextal's crystal structure vibrate with unease. They knew, Riltex whispered, reviewing the data. They've known about us since the first drone. The evidence was undeniable. The humans had tracked every Kraxen observation attempt, analyzed their technology, and prepared accordingly. Those random encounters with their teams, carefully orchestrated. The seemingly casual demonstrations of their mastery over Earth's deadly environments, deliberately showcased. We have detected multiple weapon systems activating, the sensor officer reported, their crystalline form crackling with stress. They're using our own crystalline technology against us. The humans, it turned out, hadn't just found the Kraxen's abandoned equipment, they'd reverse-engineered it, improved it, and developed countermeasures. Those teenagers taking selfies with disguised Kraxen observers. Intelligence operatives documenting their capabilities. Admiral Williams' next transmission was accompanied by a demonstration. A small human vessel approached one of the Kraxen ships, then proceeded to disable its primary systems using a modified version of the Kraxen's own technology. Your crystalline technology is fascinating, Williams commented casually, as if discussing the weather. Though we found it a bit rigid for our needs. We've made some improvements you might be interested in seeing. The Kraxen command chamber erupted in harmonic chaos as reports flooded in. Human forces were deploying worldwide, demonstrating capabilities that should have taken centuries to develop. They had adapted Kraxen crystalline technology to work with their primitive devices, creating hybrid systems that defied conventional physics. How? Zwextal demanded. How did they advance so quickly? The answer came from an unexpected source, a human child science fair project, discovered in their educational database. The project, titled Adapting Crystalline Structures for Enhanced Communication Networks, contained insights that had taken Kraxen scientists generations to develop. They turned our observation mission into a technological exchange program, Riltex realized, their scientific detachment finally shattering completely. Every piece of equipment we lost or abandoned was a gift, Vernoon finished, their crystal structure paling. They knew exactly what they were doing. The final revelation came when the humans demonstrated their full military capability. It wasn't just adapted Kraxen technology, they had weapons and defenses specifically designed for their deadly world. Vehicles that could operate in any environment, soldiers trained to fight in conditions that would kill most species, and strategic thinking shaped by evolving on a planet that constantly tried to kill them. Your species is fascinating, Admiral Williams continued, her image now displayed across the Kraxen fleet's communication systems, a feat that should have been impossible. We've enjoyed studying you as much as you've enjoyed studying us. But I think it's time we had an honest conversation about Earth's classification. Zwextal, facing the first real crisis of their long military career, made the only logical decision. Open diplomatic channels, they ordered, their crystal structure humming with newfound respect and fear. It seems we need to update our understanding of Class 13 species. The aftermath of what became known as the First Contact Incident led to significant changes in galactic civilization's understanding of Deathworld species. Earth's classification was modified to include a new notation, Class 13, Apex Guardian Species. The humans, it turned out, weren't just survivors of a deadly world, they were its chosen protectors, shaped by its challenges into something unique in the galaxy. As for the Kraxen Empire, they became Earth's first official alien allies, though their diplomatic reports always carried a standard warning: when dealing with humans, remember, they don't just survive the impossible. They teach it to dance. In the years that followed, other alien species would learn what the Kraxens discovered that day. Earth wasn't just a Class 13 death world. It was a forge that had created something far more remarkable, a species that looked at the deadliest planet in known space and called it home. And somewhere in a human classroom, a teacher was explaining to her students why the crystalline beings visiting their school looked so nervous around the class hamster.